Well, firstly, I'm very proud to be on the same platform as these principled-rooted campaigners of the Labour movement. I want to say first to Lisa, I'm going to embarrass Lisa, sorry. I've had the honour of going up to Peterborough and doing a big public meeting in support of her campaign. And Lisa, you're going to be a fantastic campaigning MP when you boot out the absolute disgrace of a Tory MP, or even human being, that is Stuart Jackson. And I just want to urge everybody, if you can, to get to Peterborough, back her campaign. She stands in the finest traditions of our party. She's there pushing an alternative to austerity and to kick that man out of Peterborough. It's also an honour to be on with Katie Clark, who's a Labour MP, who's again been a voice against austerity. He's been pushing consistently ever since he was elected in 2005 for peace, for justice, fighting for working people. And of course, Steve, who is obviously a leading pillar of Unite, a union which has been savaged and demonised by the media for good reason, because it's there trying to offer an alternative to austerity and stand up for the people it exists to represent. Friends, I want to start by saying we're winning. It was interesting, there was an article in City AM last week. I don't know if people saw it, I think many of you did. City AM being the paper of choice for the city types in London. And the headline was this: there is sadly mass support for nationalisation and price controls. Begins like this: slowly but surely, you've got a violin in the background. The public is turning its back on the free market economy and re-embracing an atavistic version of socialism, which, if implemented, would end in tears. Cry me a river. Carries on. On some economic issues, the public is far more left than the Tories realise or than Labour can believe. Oh, it's emotional. And of course, the reason for this is a poll by Class, the think tank backed by a whole range of trade unions, which did a poll which YouGov conducted, which showed that the public backed price controls on energy and transport and public ownership of Royal Mail, Energy and Rail. Even the majority of Conservative voters want rail and energy renationalised, as well as the Royal Mail. And here's the truth, and this is where the truth comes in. We're often, people who want an alternative to austerity are portrayed as extremists who languish on the fringes. So let's just consider a moment who the real extremists are. It's those who leave millions languishing on social housing waiting lists, without a secure home, with no home to allow their kids to develop and have a good upbringing, forced to languish in the private rented sector where landlords charge extortionate rents, where billions of pounds of taxpayers' money is subsidising private landlords. They're the extremists. It's those who leave millions of people getting up every morning, first thing, slogging the guts out all day and coming home with a pay packet that doesn't let them look after themselves, let alone their kids. They're the extremists. It's those who leave millions in unemployment or zero-hour contracts, a return to a supposed far bygone era, the Victorian age, where dockers would march to the yard in the morning and stick their hands up, hoping they'd get some work. They're the extremists. It's those who let the richest people in society pay absolutely no taxes whatsoever. Those people are the extremists. It's those who handed billions of pounds of taxpayers' money to the banks and allowed them to carry on business as usual, paying bonuses, not lending, unaccountable to those who bailed them out. Those people are the extremists. It's those who let the big six energy companies hold this country to ransom, who drive millions of people into fuel poverty, who let elderly people freeze to death in their homes because of price rises. Those people are the extremists. Those who subsidise the rail barons 4 times more than it was when it was publicly owned. Those people are the extremists. And finally, those who bomb and invade foreign countries, who leave British soldiers killed and maimed, and hundreds of thousands of those people in those countries maimed and killed. Those people are the extremists in British politics. It is us. We are the moderates. We, if you like, are the common sense centre ground of British politics. Because we say, instead of subsidising bosses with tax credits, instead of allowing the majority of people in work in this country, so the majority of people living in poverty, to live in people who are actually in work, we say, no ifs, no buts, a living wage for everybody, a moderate proposal. We say that instead of leaving millions of people without a secure, affordable home, we should let councils build housing to create jobs, stimulate the economy, and bring down those social housing waiting lists. We say that instead of unemployment and zero-hour contract workers and people forced to do part-time work because they can't get full-time work, the state should intervene with an industrial strategy to create hundreds of thousands of renewable energy jobs. That instead of being held to ransom by the rail and energy companies, they should be run by the public in the interests of the public. That everybody, whoever they are, however many smug accountants and lawyers they have at their disposal, they have to pay all of the taxes that they owe. And of course, to support a policy of peace, rather than sending people to kill and be killed. These are moderate proposals. And that's what we're talking about. Moderate proposals which have the support of the British public against the extremism of austerity and making people who have nothing to do with this crisis pay for a crisis in the way millions of people are doing today. Now, I'm an optimist, and I think many of you in this room share that optimism, because not only is public support shifting our way, we have seen, because of pressure from below, because of the demand for an alternative, the beginnings of an alternative being offered by the Labour leadership. What was fascinating about the price rise, the suggested Ed Miliband's temporary freeze on energy bills, is the absolute hysteria that unleashed of Marxism, of Reds under the beds, and sorts of rhetoric that belonged to Joseph McCarthy in the 1950s. Because that shows that we have people at the top so used to wealth and power being shoveled in their direction by government after government, that even a moderate deviation off that path is seen as frothing at the mouth communist revolution. But we'll see more of this. We already saw the Daily Mail, a party which backed Adolf Hitler's genocidal regime, trying to smear Ed Miliband because of his dad as the man who hated Britain. Funny, from a newspaper which hates absolutely everything about it. But we will see far more of that as those at the top realise, as City AM panicked last week and realised that the winds are shifting in our direction, that the public want an alternative, a coherent alternative, that instead of suffering the longest fall in living standards since Queen Victoria sat on the throne, that instead of being resigned to the fact their kids are going to be poorer than them, for the first time in over 100 years, they actually want an alternative. And that's where we've got to come in. We've got to give people hope. And that's what we have to get the Labour leadership to do, offer people hope. Because there's so much anger out there. There's so much fear. But there is one thing missing, and that is hope. And without hope, people do just get resigned. Or even worse, their anger is turned on their neighbours. And that's what this government have done. That's what their outriders and the media are doing. They're saying to the low-paid worker whose wages are being slashed by their boss, whose tax credits are being slashed by their government, turn your anger on your unemployed skiver neighbour. They're saying to people in the private sector, where pensions have been decimated, don't be angry with your boss who's responsible. Be angry with the nurse next door whose pension is still intact. And where has it ended? It's ended with public money being spent on vans sent to proudly mixed communities, spray-painted with the sorts of slogans that belong on National Front posters from the 1980s. It is the politics of divide and rule. And that is why it's so important Labour offers that alternative. We have to remember our history. We were founded as a party to represent working people at a time when there were two other parties that existed to represent those at the top. That historic mission is as relevant now as it has ever been. And that is what we need to be arguing. We need to be arguing that we must stand in those traditions. The party that built the National Health Service, that built the welfare state in times when economic crisis was worse than it is today, when they had worse debt and a bigger deficit. But they had courage and determination. to use the crisis they then had to build a better Britain. We must learn as well, this might sound a bit odd, from the Thatcherites of the 1970s, who could see that the winds were shifting, who used the crisis to their own advantage, who created the political space for those policies. We have to do the same thing. Let's go out and create the political space. Let's win the argument in the way we're already doing. I mean, it's funny, we've got all these results, we've got the polls shifting on all these policies, without us, frankly, being able to yell in the public domain in the way many of us would want to. We're often not even in the boxing ring in the first place, but we're still winning. Imagine if we had a national campaign that loudly and vociferously spoke about these policies. We would win public support, and we would get the Labour leadership in the way they committed to repealing the bedroom tax because people campaigned to support those policies too. So let's go and win that argument. Let's win public support. Let's loudly claim our mantle as the moderates against the extremists of austerity. And let's get a Labour government that stands up for the people it exists to represent and builds a country in the interest of working people. Thank you.